The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Reed kept sipping it anyway. The merchant vessel Wanderer drifted through space at a steady pace, carrying nothing more exciting than medical supplies and farming equipment to the outer colonies. It was honest work, boring work, the kind that paid just enough to keep a small crew fed, and the ship running. Tom was elbow-deep in the engine compartment again, muttering about worn-out parts and cheap replacement filters. The man could make anything work with enough cursing and creative engineering, which made him worth his weight in gold out here, where the nearest repair station was 3 weeks away. Anna sat in the medical bay, reading through her collection of alien anatomy texts, always studying, always learning about the dozens of species they might encounter on any given day. Don plotted courses from his navigation station, his fingers dancing across holographic star charts with the precision of someone who had been reading stellar maps since childhood. The distress signal came through during the night cycle, cutting through the usual background chatter of space traffic like a scream in a quiet room. Reed nearly dropped his mug as the ship's communication system crackled to life. The voice that emerged was unlike anything he had heard before, musical and flowing, but filled with terror and desperation. "This is Myra of the Aldery homeworld. We are under attack. Please, anyone who can hear this message, we need immediate assistance. The Krex Empire has surrounded our planet. They are bombing our cities. We have no weapons, no military, no way to defend ourselves. We are a peaceful people. All we have ever done is heal the sick and tend to the wounded. Now they want to destroy us because we refuse to surrender our medical technology." Reed sat up straighter, his exhaustion forgotten. The Aldery were known throughout this sector of the galaxy as master healers. Their medical advances had saved countless lives across dozens of worlds. They were also known for their absolute commitment to peace, never raising a hand against anyone, never building weapons, never fighting back no matter the threat. The message continued, growing more desperate with each word. "We have tried to evacuate our people, but the Krex ships destroy any vessel that leaves our atmosphere. Over 1 million civilians are trapped on the surface. The Krex general has given us one day to surrender our technology and submit to their rule, or they will kill everyone. Please, if there is anyone out there who can help us, we are begging you. We have children here, families, people who have never hurt anyone in their lives." The transmission ended with coordinates and then silence. Reed stared at the communication console, his mind racing. He had heard of the Krex Empire, of course. Everyone had. They were the nightmare that lurked in the dark corners of the galaxy, a military machine that conquered world after world with ruthless efficiency. No one fought them anymore. No one even tried. The smart thing to do was stay far away and hope they never noticed you. Tom's voice came from the engine room. "Captain, did you hear that transmission?" "Yeah, I heard it." Anna appeared in the doorway of the medical bay, her face pale. "Those poor people. The Aldery saved my sister's life when she was injured on Proxima Station. Their healers are the best in the galaxy." Dan looked up from his navigation station. "Captain, I've got their coordinates. The Aldery homeworld is about 6 hours from here at maximum speed." Reed felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The Wanderer was not a warship. It was a converted cargo hauler with minimal defensive systems and a crew of 4. What could they possibly do against an entire Krex fleet? The smart thing, the logical thing, was to pretend they had never heard the message and continue on their way, but Reed found himself thinking about his own homeworld, about the people he had left behind when he chose the life of a merchant spacer. What if it was Earth under attack? What if his family was trapped on the surface while alien warships rained death from above? Would he want every passing ship to ignore their cries for help because it was too dangerous to get involved? "Tom, how long would it take to get the engines running at full power?" "About 20 minutes, Captain." "Why?" "Anna, what do you know about Aldery physiology? Could we fit evacuation pods in the cargo bay?" Anna's eyes widened. "Captain, you're not seriously thinking about..." "Don, plot a course for the Aldery homeworld. Best possible speed." The 3 crew members stared at him in shock. Tom was the first to speak. Captain, with all due respect, have you lost your mind? The Krex Empire has been conquering systems for the past year. They have warships that could turn us into space dust without even slowing down. What exactly do you think we can do against them? Reed stood up and walked to the main view screen, staring out at the stars. I don't know yet, but I know we can't just ignore this. Those people are dying down there, and we might be the only ship close enough to help. But Captain, Dan said, even if we could somehow get past the Krex fleet, how would we evacuate? 1,000,000 people? Our cargo bay can hold maybe 100 at most. Then we'll make multiple trips. We'll find a way. We always do, Anna shook her head. The Krex don't take prisoners, Captain. They don't negotiate. If we show up in their space, they'll destroy us without a second thought. Reed turned back to face his crew. These were good people, loyal people who had followed him across the galaxy for years. He had no right to ask them to risk their lives for strangers, but he also knew he couldn't live with himself if he turned away from this. I'm not ordering any of you to come with me, he said quietly. I'll drop you off at the nearest station. If you want. But I'm going to answer that distress call, even if I have to go alone. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Tom sighed and headed back to the engine room. 20 minutes for full power, Captain. Better make it 15. Anna nodded and returned to her medical bay. I'll start preparing the cargo bay for passengers. Dan's fingers moved across his console. Course plotted and ready, Captain. The Aldery homeworld is now 6 hours away. Reed felt a surge of pride in his crew. They were about to fly into what might be certain death, but they were doing it anyway. Because it was the right thing to do. That was the thing about humans, he reflected. They had a habit of doing impossibly stupid things for impossibly noble reasons. The Wanderer's engines roared to life, and they began their journey toward the Aldery homeworld. Reed had no idea what they would find when they arrived, but he knew one thing for certain. They would not let those people die without a fight. The Aldery homeworld burned beneath a sky full of warships. Reed watched through the Wanderer's view screen as streams of energy descended from the Krex fleet like deadly rain, turning cities to ash and mountains to glass. The planet's surface glowed with the heat of destruction, and even from this distance, he could see the massive craters where population centers had once stood. My God, Anna whispered from behind him. How many people live down there? Dan's voice was tight with horror. According to the Stellar database, the Aldery homeworld had a population of 12 million, past tense. The Krex fleet hung in orbit. Like a swarm of metal predators, their ships dark and angular, built for one purpose only. Reed counted at least 30 vessels, from small fighters to massive dreadnoughts bristling with weapons. The Wanderer could barely scratch the paint on the smallest of them. Captain, Tom called from the engine room. We're running silent, but they're going to spot us eventually. These sensors aren't military grade, but they're not blind either. Reed nodded, his mind racing. The smart thing to do would be to turn around and leave. The Krex had clearly won this battle. The surface bombardment was just the final act of a conquest that had probably lasted days or weeks. But something nagged at him. The distress signal had been transmitted just hours ago, which meant some Aldery were still alive down there. Done. Scan for any intact structures on the surface. Anything that might be a shelter or underground facility? Already on it, Captain. I'm reading several large underground complexes about 50 kilometers from the largest crater. They're deep, maybe a kilometer down, but they're intact. Before Reed could respond, the communication system crackled to life again. The same musical voice from the distress signal, but weaker now, filled with exhaustion and despair. This is Myra of the Aldery. If anyone receives this transmission, please know that we tried to be worthy of your help. The Krex have been bombing us for 3 days. Most of our cities are gone. We have managed to save perhaps 100,000 people in our deep shelters, but we cannot hold out much longer. The Krex General has informed us that we have 6 hours to surrender our medical technology, or they will use seismic charges to collapse our shelters. We want you to know that we are grateful someone answered our call, even if you could not reach us in time. Reed's hands clenched into fists. 100,000 people trapped underground, waiting to die. The Kreks weren't just conquering the Aldari. They were torturing them, giving them just enough hope to make the final despair more complete. "Captain," Anna said, "we have to try something." "Anything. What exactly do you suggest?" Tom's voice came through the intercom, sharp with frustration. "We're one ship against 30. Even if we could somehow get past their fleet, how do we evacuate 100,000 people?" Reed stared at the burning planet below. Tom was right, of course. This was impossible. But then he thought about the Aldari message, about the quiet dignity in Myra's voice even as her world died around her. These people had dedicated their lives to healing others, and now they were being murdered for their compassion. "Open a channel," he said suddenly. "All frequencies." Dan's fingers flew across his console. "Channel open, Captain." Reed took a deep breath. "This is Captain Reed of the human vessel Wanderer. We are responding to your distress call. Please identify your location." The silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then Myra's voice returned, filled with surprise and something that might have been hope. "Human vessel? I'm sorry, but I do not recognize your species. Are you able to assist us?" "We're here, aren't we?" Reed said. "What's your situation down there?" "We have 97,000 survivors in our deep shelters. The Kreks are demanding we surrender our medical technology in exchange for our lives, but we know they will kill us anyway. Our archives contain healing techniques that could save millions of lives across the galaxy. We cannot allow them to use our knowledge for conquest." Reed felt a surge of respect for these people. Even facing extinction, they refused to give their enemies the tools to hurt others. "How much time do you have?" "The Kreks General has given us 5 hours and 43 minutes. After that, they will begin using seismic charges to collapse." "Our shelters, understood, stand by." Reed closed the channel and turned to his crew. "Ideas?" "Well," Tom said, emerging from the engine room, "we could ram one of their ships. Might take out a fighter before they vaporize us." "That's not an idea," Anna said. "That's suicide." "At this point, what's the difference?" Don asked. "Captain, I admire what you're trying to do, but we need to face reality. We can't fight the Kreks Empire. Nobody can. They've conquered 17 systems in the past year. They have more ships, better weapons, and they've been doing this for decades." Reed walked to the tactical station and pulled up everything the ship's computer had on the Kreks Empire. Military records, cultural analyses, battle reports from their conquest campaigns. He had studied military history in his academy days, back when he thought he might join Earth's colonial defense force. One thing he had learned was that every enemy had weaknesses, even if they seemed invincible. "Look at this," he said, highlighting a section of the cultural analysis. "The Kreks are warriors, but they're also pragmatists. They don't fight battles they can't win. They conquer through overwhelming force and intimidation. Most worlds surrender without firing a shot because they know resistance is futile." "Exactly," Tom said. "Which is why we should get out of here before they notice us." "No, you're missing the point. The Kreks rely on their reputation. They've become so used to easy victories that they might not know how to handle real resistance, and they've never encountered humans before." Anna frowned. "What are you thinking, Captain?" Reed turned back to the view screen, studying the Kreks fleet. "I'm thinking about the Battle of Thermopylae. 300 Spartans held off the entire Persian army, not because they were stronger, but because they refused to be intimidated. Sometimes the most important battle isn't the one you win, but the one you choose to fight." "Captain," Don said carefully, "those Spartans all died." "Yes, but they bought time for Greece to prepare. And more importantly, they proved that Persians could bleed." Reed paused. "The Kreks have never faced humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. They don't know our strengths or our weaknesses. And most importantly, they don't know that we're just 4 people in a converted cargo ship." Understanding dawned on Anna's face. "You want to bluff them. I want to make them think twice. If we can convince them that humans are something they should be afraid of, Maybe we can buy enough time to evacuate at least some of the survivors. Tom shook his head. Captain, that's the craziest plan I've ever heard. What makes you think it will work? Reed smiled grimly. Because it has to. Open a channel, down all frequencies. It's time to introduce the Krex Empire to humanity. The communication system crackled to life, and Reed spoke into the silence of space. This is Captain Reed of the Human Federation vessel Wanderer. I'm ordering all Krex vessels to withdraw from this system immediately. You have 1 hour to comply. The response came almost immediately, a harsh voice filled with amusement. Unknown vessel, this is General Vorth of the Krex Empire. I suggest you leave this system before we decide to add your ship to the wreckage around this world. Reed's smile widened. General, I suggest you research what happened to the last species that threatened human civilians. 1 hour, General. Don't make me repeat myself. He closed the channel and turned to his crew. Well, we've got their attention. Now we just have to convince them that humanity is their worst nightmare. The Wanderer drifted through space like a tiny insect surrounded by giants. Reed stood before the main view screen, watching the Krex fleet as they repositioned themselves, their massive ships moving with deadly precision. He could feel the eyes of his crew on him, waiting for him to explain how 4 humans in a cargo ship were going to intimidate the most feared military force in the galaxy. Tom, I need you to do something that's going to sound completely insane, Reed said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his gut. Can you modulate our engine emissions to create false sensor readings? Tom raised an eyebrow. What kind of false readings? The kind that make it look like we're not alone out here. Understanding flickered across Tom's face. You want me to make it seem like we have a fleet hiding in the background. Can you do it? Maybe our engines aren't designed for that kind of manipulation, but I might be able to create some ghost signatures. It won't fool them for long, though. It doesn't have to. Just long enough, Reed turned to Anna. I need you to access the ship's database and find everything we have on human military history. Battles, strategies, famous victories. And I need you to edit the files to make them sound like recent events? Anna stared at him in disbelief. Captain, you want me to falsify historical records? I want you to create a legend. The Krex have never heard of humans before. As far as they know, we could be the most dangerous species in the galaxy or the most peaceful. We're going to make sure they assume the former. Don looked up from his navigation station. Captain, we're being scanned. The Krex are trying to get a full sensor reading on us. Good, let them look. Tom, start those engine modifications. Make it look like we have at least 20 ships out there, all running silent. Anna, get me those files in the next 10 minutes. Don, I need you to find every piece of information we have about Krex military tactics and psychology. The crew scattered to their tasks, and Red opened a channel to the Aldery shelters. Myra, this is Captain Reed. We're going to try something, but I need you to do exactly what I say. Do you understand? Yes, Captain Reed, but I must ask, how many ships do you have? The Krex fleet is enormous. Don't worry about that. I need you to broadcast everything you know about the Krex Empire on all frequencies. Battle records, military strategies, anything that might help us understand how they think. Of course, Captain. Transmitting now. The data flowed through the Wanderer's systems, and Reed absorbed it quickly. The Krex were warriors, but they were also creatures of habit. They had conquered so many worlds through sheer intimidation that they had forgotten how to fight an enemy that refused to be scared. They respected strength and despised weakness, but they also had a deep fear of the unknown. Captain, Anna called from her station, I've got those files ready. Human military history, edited to sound like recent galactic conflicts. Good, Don, what do you have on Krex psychology? They're pack hunters, Captain. They respond to displays of dominance and superiority, but they also have a strong survival instinct. If they believe they're facing a superior force, they'll withdraw rather than risk unnecessary losses. Reed nodded. Tom, are those engine modifications ready? Just finished, Captain. We're now broadcasting sensor ghosts that should look like a full battle fleet. It won't hold up under close inspection, but from a distance, it should be convincing. Perfect. Open a channel to General Vorth. The communication system crackled to life, and the harsh voice of the Krex general filled the bridge. Human vessel. You have 37 minutes remaining before we destroy your ship along with this world. I suggest you use that time to flee. Reed smiled coldly. General, I'm disappointed. I expected the Krex Empire to be better informed about their enemies. Have you never heard of the Human Federation? There was a pause. I have no record of any human species in our databases. That's because we prefer to operate in the shadows, General. We only reveal ourselves when someone threatens innocent civilians. Reed gestured to Anna, who began transmitting the falsified historical records. You should be receiving our battle records now. I think you'll find them interesting. Another pause, longer this time. Reed could imagine the general reviewing the files, seeing edited accounts of human victories over impossible odds. Battles where outnumbered human forces had destroyed entire enemy fleets through superior tactics and ruthless efficiency. These records indicate that humans have been involved in galactic conflicts for centuries. General Vorth said, his voice less certain now. How is it that we have never encountered your species before? Because we don't advertise our presence. General, we prefer to let other species handle their own affairs. But when we receive a distress call from innocents being slaughtered by bullies, we make an exception. Reed nodded to Tom, who activated the false sensor readings. Suddenly, the space around the Wanderer was filled with ghost signatures, phantom ships that appeared to be decloaking from stealth mode. General, Reed continued, you're now detecting 23 human vessels in this system. Each one is capable of reducing your fleet to scrap metal, but I'm a reasonable man. Withdraw your forces now, and we'll let you leave with your ships. Intact, the silence stretched for several heartbeats. Reed could feel sweat beading on his forehead, but he kept his voice steady and confident. Everything depended on the next few minutes. You're bluffing, General Vorth said finally, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Am I? Reed activated the Wanderer's modest weapon systems and targeted a small sensor array on the nearest Krex ship. The beam lanced out with surgical precision, destroying the array without causing any structural damage to the vessel. That was a warning shot, General. The next one won't be. The demonstration was perfect. The Krex would see that humans could hit exactly what they aimed for, which suggested incredible accuracy and restraint. It also showed that they were willing to act on their threats. Impressive, General Vorth admitted. But one accurate shot does not make you a threat to my entire fleet. Reed had been expecting this. Anna, transmit the tactical analysis of the Krex fleet to General Vorth. Show him exactly how we would destroy his ships. Anna's fingers flew across her console, sending a detailed analysis of the Krex fleet's weaknesses and blind spots. It was information that could only have come from extensive study of Krex military tactics, the kind of intelligence that a superior enemy would possess. As you can see, General, we know everything about your ships, your weapons, and your tactics. We know that your command vessel has a vulnerability in its port shield generator. We know that your fighters rely too heavily on their speed and sacrifice armor for maneuverability. We know that your heavy cruisers have a blind spot directly beneath their primary weapons array. Reed paused, letting the implications sink in. We've been studying the Krex Empire for years, General. We know how you fight, how you think, and how you die. The question is, are you willing to test our knowledge against your fleet? The communication channel went silent. Reed could imagine the frantic activity on the Krex command ship as they tried to verify the sensor readings, analyze the tactical data, and decide whether this unknown human species was a threat they could handle. General, Reed said softly, I'm going to give you one more chance. You have 28 minutes to withdraw your fleet from this system. If you're still here when the timer runs out, we'll show you why humans are called the galaxy's most dangerous species. The channel closed and Reed turned to his crew. Now we wait and see if they believe us. Dan shook his head in amazement. Captain, That was either the most brilliant bluff in history or the most insane suicide attempt I've ever witnessed. Reed smiled grimly. Sometimes there's no difference between the two. 26 minutes remained when General Vorth reopened the communication channel. Reed could hear the tension in the Krex commander's voice, the careful control of someone trying not to show fear. Human vessel, I have reviewed your tactical analysis. Your information is accurate, but this proves nothing. Any competent military force could gather such intelligence through routine surveillance. Reed had expected this response. The Krex were warriors, and warriors did not retreat without a fight. But he also knew that General Vorth was stalling, probably trying to verify the sensor readings and determine if the human fleet was real. You're right, General. Intelligence gathering is routine, but what about this? Reed nodded to Tom, who activated a sequence he had been preparing for the past 20 minutes. The Wanderer's engines suddenly flared with impossible energy, and the ship began moving in patterns that seemed to defy physics. The modest civilian vessel danced through space like a fighter craft, spinning and weaving with impossible grace. Our ships are equipped with technology you cannot comprehend, Reed said, as the Wanderer performed a maneuver that should have torn the ship apart. We can manipulate gravity itself, bend space around our vessels, and strike from angles that your sensors cannot detect. The truth was much simpler. Tom had rigged the ship's artificial gravity system to create localized distortions around the hull, making it appear as if the Wanderer was moving through some kind of exotic space-time manipulation. It was a clever trick that would fool sensors at a distance, but it was also putting tremendous strain on the ship's systems. Tom, Reed whispered, how long can we maintain this? Maybe 10 more minutes before something critical fails, Tom replied through gritted teeth. And that's if we're lucky. Reed opened the channel to the Aldery shelters. Myra, I need you to do something for me. I need you to transmit every piece of information you have about human medicine and technology. Make it sound like we've been working together for years. But Captain Reed, we have no records of human medicine. We have never encountered your species before. Then make something up. Tell them about miraculous human healing techniques, about technologies that surpass even Aldery medicine. Make it sound like humans are the most advanced species in the galaxy. There was a pause. I understand, Captain. Transmitting now. The fabricated data flowed through space, painting a picture of humanity as a species so advanced that they made the Aldery look primitive by comparison. Medical techniques that could resurrect the dead, technologies that could heal entire planets, weapons that could destroy stars. General Vorth's voice crackled through the speakers. These medical records are extraordinary. The Aldery claim that humans have shared healing techniques that exceed even their own capabilities. The Aldery are allies, General. We've been working with them for decades. When they called for help, we responded immediately, just as we respond to any threat against our friends. Reed signaled to Anna, who began transmitting another set of fabricated records. These showed human involvement in dozens of galactic conflicts. Always as the decisive factor, always as the species that turned the tide of battle. According to these records, General Vorth said, humans have been involved in the fall of the Destroyer Empire, the defeat of the Shadow Fleet, and the collapse of the Eternal Dominion. These are legendary conflicts that occurred centuries ago. Time means little to us, General. We have been active in this galaxy far longer than most species realize. We simply prefer to work behind the scenes, allowing others to take credit for our victories. Reed was walking a dangerous line. The more elaborate the deception became, the more likely it was that General Vorth would find inconsistencies. But he also knew that the Krex respected strength above all else, and the image of humanity as ancient galactic power brokers would appeal to their warrior mentality. Impressive claims, General Vorth said, but I have seen no evidence of this. Hidden human empire, where are your worlds, your colonies, your infrastructure? This was the question Reed had been dreading. The Krex were naturally suspicious, and any military commander would want to know about the enemy's strategic resources. We are nomads, General. We have no fixed worlds, no permanent colonies. We travel between the stars in great fleets, appearing where we are needed and disappearing when our work is done. It is an old human tradition, dating back to our earliest days in space. Reed gestured to Dan, who began transmitting false sensor readings that suggested massive ships moving just beyond the edge of the system. Ghost signatures that appeared and disappeared like phantoms, always staying just out of detailed sensor range. You're detecting our fleet now, General. 23 vessels, each one capable of destroying your entire force. But we prefer diplomacy to destruction. Withdraw your ships, and we will consider this matter closed. The silence stretched for several minutes. Reed could imagine the activity on the Krex command ship as they tried to make sense of the sensor readings and the conflicting information. The Phantom Fleet was just convincing enough to be believable, but just elusive enough to be mysterious. "Captain," Tom whispered, "I'm losing power to the gravity manipulators. We can't maintain this much longer." "Hold it together for 5 more minutes," Reed replied. "Anna, transmit the final package." The last set of fabricated records showed human involvement in the destruction of species that had threatened galactic peace. Entire civilizations that had been wiped out by human fleets when they refused to abandon their aggressive expansion. It was pure fiction, but it painted humanity as a species that did not hesitate to use ultimate force when necessary. These records indicate that humans have destroyed 17 different species over the past millennium, General Vorth said, his voice tight with concern. Species that refuse to abandon their conquest campaigns. We do not enjoy destroying entire civilizations, General, but we have learned that sometimes mercy is cruelty, and cruelty is mercy. When a species threatens the peace of the galaxy, we end that threat permanently. Reed let the implications hang in the air. The Krex were conquerors, exactly the type of species that humans supposedly eliminated. The message was clear: cease your aggression or face extinction. "You are threatening the Krex Empire," General Vorth said, but there was no anger in his voice now, only calculation. "I am offering you a choice, General. You can withdraw your forces and continue your expansion elsewhere. Or you can test yourself against humanity and discover why we are called the galaxy's final answer to tyranny." The communication channel went silent again. Reed watched the chronometer tick down the remaining minutes, his heart pounding with each passing second. Everything depended on General Vorth's decision. 18 minutes, 17.16. "Captain," Don said quietly, "I'm reading movement in the Krex fleet. They're adjusting their formation." Reed felt his stomach drop. Were they preparing to attack? Had the bluff failed? "Wait," Don continued. "They're not moving into attack position. They're withdrawing. The entire fleet is pulling back from the planet." Reed couldn't believe it. The massive Krex warships were turning away from the Alderi homeworld, their engines flaring as they began to leave the system. The bluff had worked. 4 humans in a cargo ship had convinced the most feared military force in the galaxy to retreat. "General." Vorth's voice crackled through the speakers one final time. "Human vessel, the Krex Empire acknowledges your claim to this system. We will not interfere with your evacuation efforts. But know this, we will not forget this encounter. The Krex Empire will be watching for humans from now on. As will we. Be watching for the Krex, General. Safe travels." The channel closed and Reed slumped against the tactical station. The adrenaline that had sustained him through the confrontation was fading, leaving him exhausted and shaking. "Tom, shut down the gravity manipulators before they overload. Anna, delete all the fabricated records. Don, plot a course to the nearest space station. We're going to need repairs after this." As the Krex fleet disappeared into hyperspace, Reed opened a channel to the Alderi shelters. "Myra, this is Captain Reed. The Krex have withdrawn. You're safe now." The response came through tears of joy. "Captain Reed, I do not understand what happened, but you have saved us all. How can we ever repay you?" Reed smiled tiredly. "Just remember us as friends, Myra. That's payment enough." But as he watched the last of the Krex ships vanish into the distance, Reed realized that their problems were just beginning. The Kreks would investigate, they would ask questions, and eventually they would discover that humanity was not the ancient galactic power he had claimed them to be. The bluff had worked, but now they would have to live with the consequences. 3 months after the Aldery incident, Reed sat in the captain's chair of the Wanderer, staring at a message that had changed everything. The holographic display showed the official seal of the Earth Colonial Council, and the words that followed made his head spin. Captain Reed, your actions in the Aldery system have created quite a stir in the galactic community. The story of humanity's intervention against the Kreks Empire has spread to over 200 star systems. As a result, the Colonial Council has decided to establish the Human Federation as a legitimate political entity. Congratulations on your promotion to Admiral Reed. A fleet of 12 vessels is en route to your position. Reed laughed, a sound that held no humor. Tom, did you hear that? I'm an admiral now. Tom's voice came from the engine room, where he was still repairing damage from their gravity manipulation stunt. Congratulations, Admiral. Do we get better pay with the promotion? I doubt it. But we might get better equipped to handle the mess we've created. The mess was considerable. Word of the human intervention had spread through the galaxy faster than Reed had thought possible. The Aldery, grateful for their salvation, had shared the story with every species they encountered. The tale had grown with each telling, becoming more elaborate and more terrifying. According to the latest version Reed had heard, humanity commanded a fleet of 1,000 invisible ships and had single-handedly destroyed 3 galactic empires in the past year. The truth was somewhat less impressive. Anna walked onto the bridge carrying a data pad filled with messages from across the galaxy. Captain, we've received 47 requests for assistance in the past week. Everything from trade disputes to full-scale invasions. What kind of invasions? Reed asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The Kreks Empire mostly. It seems they've been testing their luck against other species, trying to determine if humans will intervene again. 3 worlds have fallen in the past month, and 2 more are under siege. Reed rubbed his temples. The headache that had been building for weeks was getting worse. Any word from the Kreks themselves? Don looked up from his navigation station. Actually, yes, General Vorth has been asking questions. He's been interrogating survivors from their recent conquests, trying to learn more about humanity. He's also been sending scouts to investigate the systems where humans supposedly destroyed other species. And what are they finding? Nothing, because those battles never happened. But the lack of evidence is only making them more suspicious. Some of the Kreks military command think humans are so advanced that they can erase all traces of their presence. Others think the whole thing was an elaborate hoax. Reed had been expecting this. The Kreks were too intelligent and too thorough to accept the human legend without investigation. It was only a matter of time before they discovered the truth. There's something else, Anna said, hesitating. We've received a message from a species called the Helix. They're offering to hire human mercenaries to help them fight off a Kreks invasion. They're willing to pay enough credits to buy a small moon. Let me guess. They think we're some kind of galactic peacekeeping force. More than that. They think we're the ultimate weapon against tyranny. The message refers to humans as the galaxy's answer to those who prey on the innocent. Reed stood up and walked to the view screen. The stars looked the same as they always had, but everything else had changed. The Wanderer was no longer just a merchant vessel carrying supplies to frontier colonies. They had become the unwitting representatives of humanity in a galaxy that was desperately looking for heroes. Captain, Tom said, emerging from the engine room with grease on his hands and concern on his face, we need to talk about our situation. The ship wasn't designed for the kind of attention we're getting. Every time we dock at a station, we're surrounded by representatives from a dozen different species. Some want to hire us, some want to ally with us, and some want to study us. And some want to kill us, Don added. I've detected at least 3 ships following us over the past week. I think some species are trying to determine if humans are really as dangerous as the stories claim. Reed nodded. He had noticed the surveillance as well. The galaxy was watching humanity now, waiting to see what they would do next. The problem was that humanity as a galactic power consisted of 4 people in a damaged cargo ship. There's more, Anna said quietly. I've been monitoring communications from Earth. The Colonial Council is taking this very seriously. They're mobilizing the entire Colonial Defense Force and calling it the Human Federation Fleet. They're also recruiting volunteers for what they're calling the Galactic Intervention Corps. How many volunteers? Over 50,000 in the first week. Apparently, the idea of protecting innocent aliens from galactic bullies appeals to a lot of people. Reed felt a mixture of pride and terror. Humans were responding to the crisis exactly as he had hoped they would, but they were also walking into a situation that could lead to the extinction of their species. If the truth about the Aldery incident ever came out, every enemy humanity had made would come looking for revenge. The communication system suddenly crackled to life and a familiar musical voice filled the bridge. Captain Reed, this is Myra of the Aldery. I hope this message finds you well. Reed smiled despite his worries. The Aldery had become humanity's strongest allies in the galaxy, and their support had been crucial in establishing human credibility. We have wonderful news to share with you, Myra continued. The Galactic Medical Council has voted to establish a joint research facility with human scientists. They want to study the healing techniques that humans shared with us during our crisis. Reed's smile faded. The Aldery still believed that humans had shared advanced medical technology during the rescue operation, and they had been telling everyone about these miraculous techniques that didn't actually exist. Additionally, Myra said, the Council of Peaceful Worlds has voted to offer humanity a seat on their governing body. They believe that human intervention capabilities are exactly what the galaxy needs to maintain peace. The message ended, and Reed slumped back into his chair. The lies were multiplying faster than he could keep track of them. Every attempt to help had created new obligations and new expectations. Captain, Don said softly, incoming transmission from Earth, it's marked urgent. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the face of Admiral Chun of the Earth Colonial Defense Force. Reed had served under Chun years ago, back when he thought military service was his calling. Reed, I won't lie to you. The situation you've created is both the best and worst thing that's ever happened to humanity. The good news is that we're no longer alone in the galaxy. We have allies, trading partners, and a reputation that opens doors we never knew existed. Reed waited for the other shoe to drop. The bad news is that we're also surrounded by enemies who see us as a threat, and we're committed to defending worlds we've never heard of against forces we can barely comprehend. The Human Federation fleet will reach your position in 2 weeks. When it arrives, you'll be given command of the 1st Intervention Squadron. The transmission paused and Chen's expression grew serious. Reed, I need you to understand something. We're not the advanced galactic power you claim to be, but we're going to try to become one. The Colonial Council has authorized unlimited funding for military expansion and technological development. We're going to build the fleet you pretended to command. There's one more thing, Chun continued. We've been monitoring Krek's communications. General Vorth is planning something big. Intelligence suggests they're massing a fleet to test human capabilities directly. They're coming for you, Reed, and when they arrive, the bluff will be over. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Reed stared at the stars and thought about the chain of events that had brought them to this point. A single decision to answer a distress call had transformed humanity from an unknown species into a galactic power, but it had also painted a target on their backs. Well, Tom said finally, at least we won't be bored. Anal laughed nervously. Captain, what do we do now? Reed stood up and straightened his shoulders. The weight of responsibility was heavier than anything he had ever carried, but he also felt a strange sense of pride. Humanity had been thrust onto the galactic stage by accident, but they were rising to meet the challenge with courage and determination. Now we do what humans do best, he said. We figure out how to make the impossible work. We've got 2 weeks to prepare for the arrival of our fleet and however long after that before the Kreks come looking for a fight. Time to see if we can turn a lie into the truth. The Wanderer continued its journey through space, no longer a simple merchant vessel, but the flagship of a legend that was still being written. Behind them, the Alderi homeworld continued its recovery, its people spreading stories of human heroism to anyone who would listen. Ahead of them, the galaxy waited to see if humanity would live up to the reputation they had accidentally created. Reed looked at his crew, these 3 people who had followed him into the impossible and somehow made it work. Whatever happens. Next, I want you to know that I'm proud to have served with you. We may have started this as a bluff, but we're going to finish it as the real thing. The stars stretched endlessly before them, full of challenges and opportunities that would test humanity's resolve. But Reed was no longer afraid. The galaxy had asked for heroes, and humanity had answered the call. Now it was time to prove that. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe was a species with nothing to lose and everything to protect.